Alrighty, well, there's Rocky. I'm getting ready to go out. I am. Hello, Rocky. I have to go into town. But, yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, though, that my uncle told me. My mother's brother, who has passed away since. He passed away from bone cancer when he was 55 years old. But anyway, I'll tell you this story, though, that he told me. He used to hunt. And one time he was hunting with a bunch of friends. One of these friends brought a couple of hounds with him to the hunt. Another friend, and that guy, this guy who had brought the hounds with him, he had come to hunt driving his wife's brand new car. Instead of bringing his own vehicle, he brought his wife's brand new car to hunt. So he had the two dogs in the car with him when he showed up, anyway, in his wife's brand new car, and brought them to hunt. Anyway, there was my uncle, and there was the guy with the dogs that was driving his wife's new car. Now, the dogs and the new car are going to come into this story. There's a reason I'm mentioning the dogs and the brand new car belonging to the man's wife. Anyway, you know why, before I'm finished the story. And it'll also maybe explain to you why I'm a cat person, you know. Anyway, the guy brought his wife's brand new car with him with the two hounds. So there was my uncle Bill. There was this man who brought the hounds with him in his wife's new car. And there were a couple other guys hunting with them too. Anyway, one of the guys that was hunting with them, not my uncle, and not the guy who had the dogs, but one of the other two, squatted down on the edge of a field right at the edge of the forest there because he had to take a dump. So he took a big poop anyway there on the edge of the forest in the field. Well, the dogs that the other man had brought come along, and what did they do? But they started fighting over the turd. And the man wasn't finished pooping yet, so they ended up knocking him backwards into the turd that he had just dropped. That was a mess. And then the two of them are fighting on top of this turd. So, I mean, they're rolling around in it and everything, fighting over it. Because, of course, to a dog, a turd is a delicacy. So the dogs got covered from head to toe, both of them did, in fecal matter. And, of course, the guy who had just dropped the turd, he was covered in fecal matter, too, because he was in the middle of it. Like literally in the middle of it, because they started fighting over the turd as he was dropping it. And so he was covered in fecal matter too. Anyway, the guy that brought the two dogs, of course, he had to take the two dogs home covered in fecal matter in his wife's brand new car. So I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if he remained married or not. I'm sure there was some sort of a fight over it, but anyway, that's just one story. Another story that I heard too, and actually it was about my mother's father. My mother's father actually disowned me when I was 12 because I refused to stop being a Catholic, and I wouldn't disassociate from my father's family. My dad's family was really good to me. My dad's parents were really good to me. But my mom's parents didn't like them, and they didn't like my dad, and it never approved of my dad, and so on. Anyway, so I was disowned by them when I was 12. But my mom's father, he worked for the CPR, for the railroad, for many years. He was what was called a car knocker. And what a car knocker did is, when the trains rolled into the station, the car knocker was basically a boxcar mechanic. He'd go around and he'd oil up and grease everything up and oil everything up and he'd check to make sure that nothing was loose. They used to bang on the boxcar with hammers. They had long rods that they'd put underneath the boxcar, and they bang on the ends of them. They put them up against the suspension components and bang on the end of the rod to make sure everything was good and tight under there. And if there were any repairs needed, then those repairs were done by those guys on the spot. They had a cart with welding torches and spare parts and everything on it, and they'd just go up the length of the train and checking to make sure that there was nothing ready to fail or fall off or whatever. When they did away with the car knockers in the late 70s, their accident rate went up quite a bit. The car knockers actually saved the railroad a lot of money and saved them from a lot of accidents too, because they caught issues with trains and with boxcars before that issue turned into a catastrophe and into an accident, into a derailment or something like that. Anyway, in the late 70s, though, they decided to do away with that job with the car knockers, and so he got laid off. So there were no more car knockers working for the railroad, no more boxcar mechanics, basically. So he got laid off, and he went to work in the local mental institution, a place was called the Rideau Regional Center. It's been closed up for decades now, and now it's being refurbished as some other sort of a thing, as like a business complex, a commercial complex. Anyway, he went to work for the Rideau Regional Center, which was, we used to also call it the Ontario Hospital. And what it was is, calling it the Ontario Hospital was kind of a diplomatic way of saying the nut house. And when I was a kid and a young man, if somebody said that somebody had been committed to the Ontario Hospital, what they were saying is they had been committed to the nut house, basically. Anyway, and all mental institutions were referred to as the Ontario Hospital. That's just what people used to say. Anyway, this was a mental institution. Well, he was working in there one time. He was doing custodial work. And his first week on the job, the first Sunday he worked, he sees this young man. He was one of the residents there, and he's all dressed up. And he's just standing around in a common area, and he's looking really sad. So he approached the young lad. He said, why are you looking so glum? What's wrong with you? He said, you're looking awful sad. And the young guy, he says, well, sir, it's Sunday, and yes, I know, well, he said, they have a religious service in the chapel on Sunday. And he said, I really want to go, but I don't have any money to put in the collection plate, so I'm ashamed to go. He said, I don't want to go and not be able to put anything in the collection plate. So my mom's dad, he pulled out a handful of change or whatever, gave him whatever change he had on him, a good fistful of change. He said, well, there you go. He said, now you got something to put in the collection plate, so go ahead and, go to your service, So anyway, fella, thank you, he said. He brightened right up and he thanked him, and away he went. Well, they also had a little store in the institution, a little commissary where you could buy different things, including snacks and candy and whatnot. Anyway, about 15 minutes later, he sees this same young man wearing just regular street clothes. He wasn't wearing his Sunday best anymore. And he's standing outside of the little store eating candy. So anyway, that's where his money went. And so he used to say you couldn't underestimate these people. They had their problems, but they weren't as dumb as you might think they are, Anyway, so he got taken on that deal. But I'll tell you this story, though, that's really funny. One time there was an inspector coming from the big government office in Toronto. Like, all these hospitals were under provincial jurisdiction. And so the main office that controlled all that stuff was in Toronto at Queen's Park, which is the legislative place for Ontario, for the province of Ontario. Anyway, there was this inspector coming from Toronto, and he was going to be inspecting the building and that sort of a thing, I guess checking on the living conditions of the residents, of the inpatients and so on. And so, anyway, this guy, he comes down from Toronto. It was early in the morning when he arrived at the hospital. And he parks right by the front doors. Well, there's this guy standing out front wearing a commissionaire's uniform. The commissionaires are sort of like, they're like parking police, basically. When in the small towns around here, you'll see commissionaires walking up and down the street and writing tickets for people who are parked illegally or overparked at a meter or whatever, They're called commissionaires. Anyway, they wear a uniform, and this fella, he was wearing a commissionaire's uniform. Well, the guy gets out of his car, the inspector does, and this guy standing out front in the commissionaire's uniform, he yells at him. He says, "Hey, what are you doing? You can't park there." He said, "You're going to have to move your car or I'm going to give you a ticket." So the guy got back in his car and he starts it up and he backs out of there and he wheels it around and he parks it in another spot nearby, and he gets out of the car, and the guy in the uniform comes charging over to him mad. He says, "Hey, didn't I just tell you you had to move your car?" And the guy says, "Well, I did move my car." "No," he said, "you can't park there either. You better move your car or I'm going to give you a ticket." So the guy shrugs his shoulders, he gets back into his car, and he moves it way down to the far end of the lot, as far away from the building as he can get it. And then he had to walk all the way across the yard to get to the building to go inside. And he goes inside anyway, and he's talking to one of the guys that was working in there, whoever it was he was supposed to meet that was going to take him on this tour. And he of course, he was all winded and everything when he got into the building. He was all flustered and he was winded and everything. And he said, and anyway, the guy that he was meeting with says to him, he said, "You seem awful winded." The guy said, "Well, I had to park way down at the far end of the property," he said. And anyway, he said, "Well, no, you didn't have to do that." He said, "You could have parked right by the front door." He said, "You didn't need to park down there." And the guy says, well, the inspector says, "Well, the guy out front in the uniform told me, the commissionaire out there, he told me that I couldn't park there. He said he put the run on me twice. So I finally just parked as far away from the building as I could get." And the other guy, the guy he was meeting with, he says, what are you talking about?" He said, "We don't have anybody like that out there." He said, "There's no commissionaire or parking attendant or anything out there." It turns out what it was one of the patients. And see, they used to do the laundry for the commissionaires, and also they used to launder the local policemen's uniforms and stuff in the laundry there at the hospital. They had the contract to do all those, to wash all those uniforms. And this patient had stolen a commissionaire's uniform out of the laundry.